series, a number of webinars on various topics. The topics were such that they were diverse in nature, and in each act, we personally thought maybe there is not much of a correlation between the topics taken. Sometimes on one particular topic, at the other time it will be entirely different on some other thing. Where didn't look to be a series sort of a thing. And two, the level of programs was of a higher standard, where we had targeted the best possible speakers in the country. And we definitely gained a lot from their knowledge and wisdom. There at that stage, we also thought that a good number of our members who are the youngsters, who may have just about 5 years of experience, also have a number of issues relating to the profession. So somehow we were not providing sufficient assistance to them, and it was thought that let us have a focus that we provide assistance to our younger members as well as the staff of our senior members in our offices. And to start off, we took up GST because GST was has been one particular area on which there has been a lot of demand, lot of confusion, and subsequent thereafter, we would take up the issues maybe in income tax. In times to come, we will take up some sessions on income tax. I requested Mr. H.L. Madan to work out a program, and Mr. Madan is doing these sort of programs on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, as well as in respect of some universities where he is teaching. So we could not find a person better than Mr. H.L. Madan to conceptualize the entire workshop of 10 days, covering different aspects of the GST law that we have. I think this will be in the nature of a workshop where it will be a two-way traffic, that the members attending the program would also have sufficient time to interact with the speakers and get clarification on the queries or the issues that they have. I think before we formally start the program, as our Indian culture is, the invocation of God. It is God Ganesh or Saraswati. Today we have an invocation of God Ganesh, so that which is Vignakarta. Just say, so that we do not have any problem in the program that we have, and the entire series of 10 lectures goes on smoothly. I request Anuj to kindly play the clip.
Gajanana bhuta ganadi sevidam kapithajam bhupalacharu bhakshanam umasutam shoka vinashakarakam namami Vigneshwara pada pankajam namami Vigneshwara pada pankajam namami Vigneshwara pada pankajam pranamya shirasa devam gauri putram vinayakam bhaktavasam smare nityamayu kamatha siddhayai सिद्धये कामार्थ सिद्धये
Ganpati Baba Maurya. I request Mr. H.L. Madan, the course director, to kindly take over the session from here onwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srivastav ji. And a very nice beginning you have made with Ganesh Vandana. That is very nice. Honorable sir, Chairman of the session, Honorable Nikita Madam, National President, our respected speakers, H.C. Bhatia ji, Sujit Ghosh bhai, and respected seniors, respected professional brothers and sisters, chairmen from all the zones, secretaries, and all other office bearers which are participating at the moment. I am extremely grateful to the AIFTP North Zone for giving me the opportunity to design this program. Although everything is to be done by Mr. A.K. Srivastav, it was his vision only. Basically, since lockdown, the All India Federation, all zones have acted so brilliantly to educate their members, and all difficult topics, all critical issues, all serious matters like critical issues in all the chapters of ITC, supply, place of supply, time of supply, value of supply, etc., etc. Then High Court judgments, advance rulings, 140 transitional provisions, all have been discussed in detail and depth, so that our all senior
Madan sir is muted.
Yes, it's okay. Voice is coming now.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay now.
Right, thank you. So many programs have been organized by all zones of AIFTP very nicely and in very depth, which has entirely educated us a lot. But Srivastav said that when we are become seniors every year, gap is to be filled up by the youngers. And those young members may not be 3 years old, maybe 5 years old in practice, or the graduates and or postgraduates coming directly for jobs with all our seniors. Of course, our seniors must be having their juniors with them who are doing compliance job. But in order to teach them, somebody should be there. And if every senior has to devote that much time to teach those members, it will be very difficult. So why not in this lockdown facility available with us, we should start a program which should be helpful to this average members of beginner professionals as well as the staff of the various members who can help them in complying with the compliances work. With this idea in mind, we have, of course, it may not go to a very high extent. At the same time, the speakers will be of senior level, because only senior level speakers can educate those even young members, even the office staff. Can you imagine? Institute of Chartered Accountant has started this program to educate the office staff of the Chartered Accountants. And on the day one, there were 700 registrations, although there was a fixed fees also. So here we do not have any fees. The program will go free of charge, and courtesy is Gupta for a facility. So with this in mind, we wanted that each chapter speaker will get it 1 hour to 1.5 to speak on so no doubt during that deliberation seniors what are the important issues and what are the critical issues, those will also be discussed. Those will not be behind, those will also be discussed. Now we have with us Mr. H.C. Bhatia, who has been Vice President of the Sales Tax Bar Association for 5 terms. And he is such a personality. He is an advisor to Delhi government for High Court cases. He advises that who is to be appointed, who is to be taken, and how to proceed the case, whether we should file a case in the High Court or not. He is an advisor to Delhi government for so many years. He is a person under whom I have completed 3 years as Vice President, and he is a person who has taught me how to organize a conference, how to help the other members. He is a person who helped the members without having anything in his mind that what he is going to get out of it. No. I can tell you, he's such a nice person that has come to my life. So friends, we have with us, he will give his words of wisdom to commence this program and give his blessings for all. So friends, I hand over the mic to Mr. H.C. Bhatia, if he is available, because I cannot see his face. Bhatia sir?
Hanji Madan sir, yes, I am here.
Yes sir, please say a few words of wisdom for our program.
No words of wisdom. I am not a wise man who can give those words of wisdom. I am just an ordinary man. And thanks for these kind words. Respected Joshi Sahib, President Nikta Ben, Madam Prem Lata Bansal, Chairman Indirect Taxes Mr. Madan, my friend in absentia Sujit Ghosh, Mr. A.K. Shrivastava, Mr. Zafar, he is also in absentia, Mr. Mukul Gupta, Mr. V.P. Gupta, Mr. Satya Narayan, dear Puneet and Anuj, Madam Jamna Shukla, other office bearers and friends. First of all, let me congratulate AIFTP and Mr. H.L. Madan, Chairman Indirect Taxes Committee, for this excellent initiative. I have just come to know that Mr. A.K. Shrivastava is also behind this. My congratulations to Mr. A.K. Shrivastava also. Friends, I believe that learning never ends. This is all the more true of GST, where every day there is one or the other amendment. It is very difficult even for the professionals to keep pace with the amendments. During this period of lockdown, webinars through virtual hearing have become very effective way to satisfy our appetite for learning. Today's topics: introduction to GST with constitutional amendment and constitution and functioning of GST Council and GSTN are the basics, or if I were to say so, foundation of GST law. Personally speaking, for myself, I consider them most important topics. These are bound to make our concepts clear. India being a federal country, there is division of powers to legislate between the center and the states. While the states legislated sales tax or VAT laws, Union had enacted central excise and service tax law. Under GST, since both states and the Union were required to give concurrent powers to legislate on intra-state transactions and Union alone on interstate transactions, a simple and I would also say a magical way has been found by inserting Article 246 246A in the Constitution, which overrides Article 246 and Article 254. A number of indirect taxes have been subsumed in GST with the slogan "One Nation, One Tax." How far this has proved to be correct would also need to be commented from Mr. Sujit Ghosh, who is not there, but Mr. Madan or somebody else can tell him that he must speak
Sujit is there.
on this. Yes. He's
Sujit
there.
is very much there now. Yeah, he's
Okay.
he has come. He is there.
Sujit,
I'm
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Sujit.
Yeah, welcome. I just had posed one question that when these indirect taxes were subsumed in GST, the slogan was "One Nation and One Tax." How far this has proved to be correct? Please, I hope that you would answer this also. GST Council has been given the status of a constitutional authority under newly inserted Article 279A and empowered to make recommendations on varied subjects, including the legislation and the rates, exemptions, etc., based on which Parliament and the states make the law and issue notifications. However, many a times its recommendations are not acted upon timely, and the same remain in the back burner storage for months together. This is a matter which needs attention. One thing good about GST Council is that it is responsive to the problems of the assessees. However, it is GSTN which acts like a spoiled sport. A boy who says na khelunga na khelne dunga. It is over 3 years and still GSTN has not been able to overcome the system glitches. Hundreds of writ petitions in the high courts all over India have been filed because of the failure of the GSTN. What to say about today's speaker, who is an iconic figure? Mr. Sujit Ghosh, with 25 years of experience, is a star and master speaker in indirect taxes. This is abundantly clear from the fact that he is invited by the National Judicial Academy to speak in the training programs of judges. When he delivers a lecture or argues a matter in the court, audiences or the judges listen to him with apt attention and awe. I am a witness to this when he was arguing a matter of the Sales Tax Bar Association in the High Court of Delhi before a bench headed by a difficult judge, Justice Sanghi, in a writ in which we have challenged Rule 36(4) of the CGST rules. Give him any topic and he would be as thorough as anyone can be. He would go deep into it and come out with pearls. There would not be any issue remaining untouched. Graduating from the National Law School, Bangalore, reflects his sheen from the very beginning. Sujit has been recognized as the Tax Lawyer of the Year 2016 by the Indian National Bar Association and as Star Tax Lawyer of the Year by Legal Era in the year 2017, as also in 2018. He has been awarded the Leadership Excellence Award 2017 for practicing innovation in taxation laws. He has also been ranked as one of the leading indirect tax professionals in India in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016 by International Tax Review. He appears all over India in different high courts and Supreme Court of India. I welcome you, Sujit. Before I hand over to the organizers, Sujit, I would like to comment on one thing as to why clause 29A in Article 366 is still there and has not been omitted. Is it that the framers thought that if GST does not succeed, they may have to revert back to the system of VAT? Or Is it that they wanted to serve it as a lighthouse on the principles of law, such as composite contracts, theory of dominant intention, theory of aspect theory, etc.? With these words, over to the organizers. Thank you, friends.
Kindly unmute Mr. H.L. Madan.
Yes. So, Bhatia sir, thank you so much. You have done my job also to introduce Mr. Sujit Ghosh so nicely that now I have nothing to speak about it, and that time will be saved with me. And now I request our national president, Nikita madam, to give his blessings and give her blessings and inaugurate this session.
Good evening, everybody. My seniors, Sri P.C. Joshi sir and Madam Premlata Bansalji, the Vice President of the Zone, Sri A.K. Srivastava, the Chairman, Asim Jafarji, Course Director, H.L. Madanji, and all seniors and the members of this program. I can see many office bearers of the North Zone also present. I'm very glad to see them all together. Well, much is said by Bhatia sir, and a very precisely he has stated what is the crux of the today's lecture also. And I should not waste my time in going further. But let me congratulate further on merits. Let me congratulate A.K. Srivastava and Madanji for thinking about this program. I have just now messaged to my juniors also, you better join this so that I don't have to explain to you, and very correctly said by Mr. Madan, because it's very difficult. The GST law is made so complex, and to keep in touch with each and every notification and the clarification and circular is very difficult. And if somebody is teaching you from the root, root to the top things, then I think there is no other way but to join this course so that everybody can learn from the bottom to the top. Anyway, this is a nicely conceptualized program. I congratulate the North Zone for doing so. And today's speaker, Ghosh sir, already we all know him very well. He is the star speaker. And of course, about the chairman, P.C. Joshi, nothing to add, sir. He is the master, and he is the master in GST also. So friends, without wasting time, since we have already crossed 6:30, I would declare this course as open for all the members, and I would request you all to request your juniors and also request all the other fraternity to join so that they can enrich themselves on the basics and enrich themselves by asking the question answer also, because fortunately there is going to be a question answer session also in this. Friends, I keep this open. I wish best of luck to the North Zone for achieving greater heights. Thank you very much. Over to you, Madan sir.
Thank you, madam.
Yes. So, madam, thank you so much. Madam, I should tell you one thing, that some members asked me that after 3 years of GST, why you are keeping this basic course for the people?
Oh, very much required.
And when we have already learnt so much from all the zone speakers, then what was the necessity of it? They are right because they are seniors. They have deep knowledge of the things. But we must not forget that the coming generation is yet to come. Them also. And normally kindly see that whenever a young member or a beginner or a student will read this law, they will not read this chapter of introduction with constitutional amendment. They will start with supply, input tax credit, etc., etc. Purposely, this chapter has been kept today so that even those persons must know what was the importance of constitutional amendment in order to introduce GST, and what is GST Council, what is their constitution, what is their function, as well as the GSTN also. So with these words, I request Honorable PC Joshi sir. PC Joshi sir, मैं जब भी किसी सेमिनार में या वेबिनार में बोलता हूं, PC Joshi sir is always my chairman. And today also, I'm a course director and he's again the chairman of the session. So, sir, Joshi sir, बहुत-बहुत प्रणाम आपको, and I invite you to give your blessings to start the program. Joshi sir.
Our National President, Madam Nikita ji, Premlata ji, today's speaker, learned Sujit ji, because I still say learned because he is all-rounder. I would say all-rounder. And Bhatia ji rightly said that you give him the subject, he will deliver the lecture, very in-depth study. In addition to that, we have today Mr. Vice President, Mr. A.K. Srivatsa, who has planned this program. And let me tell you, 10 days program, except today, is always on Sunday and Saturday. Sunday and Saturday. Now, today is Tuesday. And you know, Tuesday is normally
Yes.
Ganapati Day or Ganesh Ji Day. So when you start on a Ganesh Ji Day with the blessing of Ganesh Ji, there cannot be any hindrance to the success of the program. And therefore I'm quite sure that those who are not joining will be missing a lot. Now we have Mr. Gupta, VP Gupta, I must thank him for sponsoring the 10-day session Zoom program and sponsoring it. Then our secretary, Mr. Punitji, I had given him lot of trouble when I whenever I visit. And our usual Mr. Mukul Gupta ji, he's a what you call a man whom I can never forget. I won't say anything now because I've been telling so many things. Now, Mr. Bhatia, I know him since years. My friend Mr. Sarin once introduced him, Mr. P.S. Sarin. And I had visited the Delhi District Bar Association. And at that time, he introduced Mr. Bhatia. Since then, I am so close to him. But let me tell you one time, and accidentally, I think in Radhe Radhe temple, we met myself and Bhatia accidentally. अरे आप दिल्ली से आए हम बम्बई से आए. That is how it is, and that is the plus point for All India Federation. And we would not know, but for the Federation, we have come so close to everybody. Now, today's program, let me tell you one anecdote in this regard. One of the seminar which I was speaking out on GST and impact of Constitution Amendment to the levy, I just asked from the audience as to how many people have read Constitution. And believe me, out of 300 participants in the hall, there are hardly 10 people who say that I have read Constitution. Now, if that is so, particularly for juniors, they must be told what is the role of the Constitution. And let them be told that any law in the country, whenever it is in conflict with the Constitution, will be absolutely contrary to Article 265, and it will be absolutely ultra-vires and illegal. So this is a basic point which the beginners should understand and should know what is Article 265. So Article 265 limits that no tax can be levied or collected without the authority of law. And therefore, and law means what? Law framed by a competent authority or competent legislature. Earlier, there were conflict between the levy by other states where the jurisdiction was being challenged. So therefore, I am addressing this to juniors that you first of all understand that any law which is contrary to the provisions of the Constitution would be invalid. Now, in that regard, I would pose a question. Article 246A provides for simultaneous power to the state as well as the parliament to levy tax on supply of goods or services. Now the basic question is, the levy is on supply. Now what my mind is still not resolved with this query, and this is something which goes to the root of the matter, and that is this. I want all of you to apply the mind. What is the difference between activities and supply? See, whether now activities is a genus and supply is the specie. When the parliament has given the power to parliament and the state legislature to provide for levy of tax on supply of goods and supply of services, whether they can include the activities. Now, activities are maybe many, and there may be non-commercial activities also. There may be gift, there may be any transfer, which according to me may not apply to supply. Therefore, the basic question which I would like Mr. Sujit to apply his mind on this is whether in Schedule 1, 2 and 3, when they speak of activities, including the provisions of Section 7 and 9 and even 15, they speak of activities. Whether is it valid law when the provisions of 246A specifically say that it is a levy, it has to be levy on supply of goods and supply of services. In that connection, I also pose a question whether the parliament can provide for levy of tax on transfers to branch. Can it be called a supply for a consideration in the course of a business? No. Especially because the definition of the term person does not include the branch. And English Electric Company, Supreme Court has said that the branch and the HO are one and the same in law. One and in some law. So therefore, when you provide for levy of tax on supply of services or supply of goods, it has to be from one person to another, and a person has been clearly defined, not to include a branch. These are all things which still to be resolved by the higher court, high court, or the Supreme Court. But for young people, I think it will be too hard a question for them to solve. But I would love to learn. I would like to learn from Mr. Surjit. Especially, one more last question I would like to put it. Impact of Section 19 of the Constitution Amendment Act, 101 Constitution Amendment Section 19. It is not a part of Constitution, but it has an impact on the future levy or future amendments to the earlier erstwhile VAT Act. Now the question is that Section 19 prohibits or automatically makes the law in force on say 1/7/17 to be valid only for 1 year from 12/9/16. That is the day on which the Constitution Amendment came into force. So therefore, whether the state legislature can touch in any case Some of the states have repealed the erstwhile VAT Act. Some of the states have not repealed the VAT Act, but they have amended to the extent of the goods being specified goods only and not goods in general. But the question is whether the VAT Act can at all be amended or can be amended after 1 year of 12 September 2016. This is the basic point which also is one of the questions which troubles me quite often. And I have challenged in one of the court matter in the writ petition also. And the government unfortunately could not answer that question. And the matter is adjourned. I don't know when it will come up again. So friends, these are all questions which troubles me at this age. But it is for the young people to sort it out. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, just.
Anuj, I think you have to unmute.
Sir, already unmuted you.
You are unmuted, sir.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Joshi sir. You have created few more questions for Mr. Sujit Ghosh, in addition to what was added by Mr. H.C. Bhatia. No problem. This program has been designed in such a way that except today, every program is on either Saturday at 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. so that our members can finish their work up to 6 o'clock with their staff also. And staff is also free, members are also free, and they can learn up to 8 o'clock before their dinner is ready. And on the next day, after their breakfast at 11 o'clock, they can come join, and by 1 o'clock before their lunch is ready, the program will be over. So it has been designed in such a way so that nobody has any problem, either the employer as well as the staff also. So with these words, and as about Mr. Sujit Ghosh, he is such a wonderful speaker. When he speaks so powerful that at that point of time, he will not give you even a second to look here or there. You just go on watching on him or he's on PPT. And today, PPT is also not available. So you are just to watch Mr. Sujit Ghosh and try to learn as maximum as possible on the constitution provisions. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Mr. Sujit Ghosh, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming this evening. It's a pleasure of being back to my fraternity, my association. It's always been a pleasure interacting with all of you. I've learned a lot in the last 25 years, mingling with so many of you. If I start taking names, I'll probably spend the rest of the evening taking the names, but all of you seniors from whom I've learned from your feet, it's indeed a pleasure to be back home. When Madan Saab called me about 10-15 days back, it was scheduled, this event was scheduled some time back, and I started putting out some slides, and then for some reason it had to be aborted. And then when he called me a couple of days back, I requested, say, I probably won't have any slides because I'm just running short of time. So I said, today I'm going to do an extempore, as if all of us are having a cup of tea and we're trying to appreciate the law. And if we were talking about the constitutional amendment, and I think what is important for all of us to understand is why did we need it to begin with? If you trace back the history of our country since independence, or even before that, even across the world, sovereignty is a fundamental attribute which is necessary concomitant for you to be able to collect the tax. Earlier, it used to be the command of the sovereign. Tax used to be called as the command of the sovereign, which means that if the sovereign wanted to collect, it could do so at will. We had outrageous taxes across the world, window tax, tax on the basis of number of children, and you have it. And there are ends and ends, endless examples of weird, strange, all kinds of variety of taxes. But all of the legitimacy of the ability to collect tax was based on the sovereignty. India was a new nation, and it continues to be a new nation. We are what, 72, 73 years old. And at the helm of everything, when the transition of power happened from the British to us, we formed ourselves into a federal country. And there was a huge amount of debate in the Constituent Assembly in terms of who will retain what kind of taxing power. there was a lot of debate surrounding trying to replicate the model in the United States. And in the United States, as you all know, that is also a federation. There are any number of states, and there is a central federal government as well. That country had a very strange phenomena. That country had a phenomena where they said that, look, the central government or the federal government will retain very few powers insofar as taxation is concerned. Those powers were restricted to defense, those powers restricted to international relationships, and so on and so forth, a very few power. But the substantive power to collect tax was retained by the states themselves. Over a period of time, okay, what we saw is a similar model being replicated in Canada. And in Canada, it was just the reverse. In Canada, what started happening was that the federal government had an expansive set of powers and the states had limited powers, very specific areas. In short, the residuary power to levy tax or collect tax in the United States was with the states. The residuary power to collect tax was in Canada was with the federal. And India had a great lot of debate in terms of where would they park this residuary power, because residuary power, as we all know, is the most important power, a very powerful thing. In the Constituent Assembly debate, they realized that, well, we can't go either the Canadian way or the American way. We would rather have a balanced approach where we will give adequate power. And the word I want to use is adequate power to the state governments, as much to the central government. And there will be an area where both of us will have power to legislate and therefore the concurrent. And the residual power, for the right reason, good reason, we can't tell, history will judge it. The residuary power was retained by the federal government or the central government. And therefore you had the list 1 with the central government, the list 2 with the state government, and list 3 with the, which is called the concurrent list. Now, as I mentioned, the king's power to collect tax gave the legitimacy. But once you had the written constitution, as one would say, the Grundnorm of a country, that was the highest law. And the highest law had to authorize the power to the administrator to be able to collect it. And therefore, we felt the need of 265. You shall not collect tax without authority of law. It was not only levy, but also collection. Both levy and collection, they go hand in hand. And there was an authorization of law that was needed. And therefore, 265 came in. Now then, what is law? The law for purpose of 265 would take us back to 246. 246 is essentially talking about the distribution of power. So the power was adequately distributed wide 246 to list 1, list 2, list 3. So in essence, the states were sovereign and absolute power so far as collecting of tax, insofar as matters connected with sale of goods, matter connected with municipality related aspects, and various other taxing aspects which all of you are aware, and I need not get into the granulars. But the point I'm trying to make is that sovereignty or the power of that state could not have been denuded just like that. Otherwise, we would have had a secession. Remember something, while we call ourselves India, but we are actually several countries within the country tied to this one document called the Constitution of India. If there is any imbalance that happens to the constitutional structure or the positioning of the power between the state and the center, we are looking at a secession. Oftentimes, some of the secessions that people have spoken about, if you go to the Northeast, many of the times it has happened because of what is called the fiscal independence, lack of fiscal independence, or over-dependence on central largesse. So the point I want to make for you all to appreciate is the enormous importance of the sovereign's independence to collect tax. After all, what is tax meant for? Tax is meant for ensuring welfare of the state that they are governing. And for welfare of the state, what you need the money to be able to pumping in your road construction, bridges, employee payment to the state servants, and what have you. So if you do not have an independent ability to run your P&L, if I were to use that word, and you're dependent or over-dependent upon the central largesse, you are effectively being controlled politically as well by the central largesse. It is this particular delicate balance that our constitution so provided, that we had the central list, which is list 1, we had the state list, list 2, and the concurrent list. Now let's rewind back in time and go back to 1985, 86, even prior to that. The manufacturing tax continued for a long, long time. And there was a distortion in the economy to the extent possible. There was tax on tax because the manufacturer had no way to be able to offset the cost that it had incurred in its raw material. Same was the state of affairs insofar as traders were concerned. Traders would purchase goods on payment of excise duty and they had no way to offset it. And look at it this way, if you have incurred the tax in the state of Maharashtra, because the state of Bengal was an independent sovereign and the state of Maharashtra was an independent sovereign, there was no question of anybody trying to set off anybody else's taxes. And therefore, every time goods moved from a state A to state B, aside of the debate whether it was an interstate sale or not, okay, we are not getting into Bengal immunity and the likes, aside of that particular debate whether it was an interstate sale or not, there was never any ability of fungibility of taxes paid in one state to the taxes incurred in the other state. And therefore, you had significant distortions running across. And the movement started off providing credits. And therefore, you had the MAN VAT, the SMOT VAT, the SEN VAT. 2004, 2005, sales tax moved to VAT. So in their own silos of the central state government and the state governments, tax reform started happening. And the first and foremost first and foremost reform that took place was to ensure that the cascading of taxes kind of got denuded. But that was not enough. If you read the report of the Finance Commission back then, if you read Satya Poda's document back then, if you read Kelkar Commission's report back then, and several documents that were floating around in 2004, 5, 6, etc., the suggestion was we need to have a uniform system of taxation, a conversion and a melting point where it will really be a one nation, one tax. So while people use one nation, one tax as an euphoric statement, I would believe that one nation, one tax was a necessary concomitant of the wide distortion that the market saw because of choices of consumers was not driven by quality. Choices of consumers was driven by inefficiencies that was available to them, made available to them. And the real GDP of the country was also not reflective of the real value creation the market had. There was significant distortion that the economy had. And not to speak about lack of tax neutrality. And tax neutrality essentially means that the business enterprise is not your scapegoat from whom you collect your penny. Businesses are flow-through arrangements who create value, but it is the consumer who needs to bear the burden because they are all consuming the taxes or consuming the goods and services, the ultimate beneficiary. So from the point of the manufacturer-driven, sale-driven, or the point of discharge, the point of supply-driven, thought started evolving based on international jurisprudence that we need to get the consumption level. And therefore, we had to move into some new structure which will tax consumption and not businesses. That was the overall ethos. Three things, therefore: remove cascading, tax neutrality, make the consumer pay the tax and not the business. But for a country as large and diverse as we have, constitutional amendment was but necessary. Because as I spoke at the prelude, the sovereignty of the states were very, very important and it could not have been denuded. Therefore, the model that the government of India and the states together came to the table to agree, based on several papers that they had, that we will have concurrent powers. We will remain sovereign in our areas. There will be a give and there will be a take, which means that the state gets to now tax services. Central gets to tax all those transactions which was specifically happening within the state. And therefore, ultimate goal that they wanted to have was the convergence of all taxes, unified into one thread and one name, such that the distortions in the economy that was happening because of cascading effect of taxes are completely denuded. Taxes becomes tax neutral. The whole taxation becomes tax neutral. So 246, which gave the separation or distribution of power between the state and the center, had to be given a go by. But it couldn't have been withdrawn. It couldn't have been deleted. Mind you, why? Because customs continues. Income tax continues. There are some taxes that will not get into GST for some time, and probably not for the longest time that you and I can think of. So therefore, they had to come out with a rider to say that notwithstanding anything contained in 246, 246A is now being initiated. Now, even in 246A, even though we talk about a concurrent power, central government continued to keep their leverage or their supremacy when it came to interstate supplies. So that rider continues that insofar as interstate supplies are concerned, that power will be only with the central government. And therefore, we had to come out with a three-tier structure of taxes. A concurrent power to levy tax in the form of state GST and a central GST, and an IGST which is mutually exclusive, which will remain rested with the central government. So we borrowed best of both the worlds. We borrowed our good experience of 40, 50 years, 60 years from the domestic tax reforms and tax regime, and we borrowed a dual GST model that was there in Canada. And therefore 246A in the real sense is nothing but a convergence of power, what some people call it as a cooperative federalism, which is a euphemism to me, and I'll talk about that a little later. A cooperative federalism where both central and state come together and they have the power to collect, levy and collect the tax. That was 246A for you. And the way 246A is defined is 246A says, have power to make laws for the whole or any part of the territory of India with respect to goods and services provided, service tax provided under 246A or any other matter enumerated in the state list. Sorry, I'm sorry. 246 says, have power to make laws with respect to goods and service tax imposed by the union or by such state. And goods and service tax, and this brings me to the first of the difficult questions that I have been informed in advance in this conversation. Goods and service tax has been defined to mean any tax on supply of goods or services or both, except taxes on supply of alcohol, liquor for human consumption. The word supply is not defined. But when a word is not defined in the constitution, where do you draw the meaning of that word from? Who is competent to decide what is a supply? Is it the trader who will tell the government, I believe this is the supply? Is it the government that will, or the executive that will come and tell the courts that this is a supply? So whenever there is a word in the constitution that is not defined, and there is a legislative competence available with the parliament concerned or the state legislature concerned to enact in respect thereof, wide sweep is available to that legislative body to define what it means. Unlike what used to happen earlier on, if you see the nature of the wording, it says goods and service tax means any tax on supply. So the question is, what is going to be a tax? What kind of tax are we talking about? That is also not defined, because unlike 366(29)A, etc., which says tax on sale or purchase of goods means, because there was a definition clause to power under 54, 84, all of that, list 1, list 2, etc., to take you back to 360(29)A and the likes. Here, the word tax on supply of goods is not defined. So the constitution does not come into anybody's rescue to be able to take a position supply could mean X or supply could mean Y. Both could be correct, no difficulty there. But the rules of engagement is that if the legislative power is available with the concerned legislature to legislate on a particular thing, if there is anything that gets incidentally subsumed in that, it can do so. And when the parliament, as also the state, have defined what a supply is, they have not left it in a very loose form. They have given it the widest choice that is possible by use of the word. For the purposes of this act, the expression supply includes. Concern is whether an activity is a supply. Well, the concern could also be whether a processing is a supply, whether a processing is a supply, whether a license is a supply, whether rental, yes, we all understand there's a use of goods. My thought process on that, and subject to what others may feel, that what is a supply nevertheless is nebulous, but what is a supply can be understood in the context of section 9, section 7. We don't have to look anywhere beyond that. So if there are activities that have been listed in the schedule to say these will mean supply, then the legislature is defining the area of its operation as part of his plenary legislative power. Unlike other taxes on income, okay, or taxes on sale or purchase of goods, as I mentioned, there, if you go back in time, Gannon Dunkerley, taxes on sale or purchase of goods They wanted to understand the meaning of the words goods. They went to a parallel legislation, the sale of goods, to appreciate, can there be chattel qua chattel supply, or can there be a transfer of property in goods during execution of work? So therefore, they had a frame of reference in terms of the Sale of Goods Act. Is there any parametrial legislation available for any of them to be able to rely upon? Probably not, because supply is for the first time looked into in the has come into our Indian context. So my belief is that even if the word supply may be mentioned, which may not be defined, the courts most likely, they're more likely than not, are going to be influenced, and probably that may be the correct view, in my view, that you draw upon Section 7 to appreciate what is a supply. But I'll jump back to a more fundamental question. The thing is, when the power under 246A is conferred, are they contemplating services and goods as two separate baskets? In other words, do they maintain a distinction between what a goods is and what a service is? Let's read GST goods and service tax again. It uses the word means any tax on supply of goods or services or both. And a very interesting and difficult question that has been posed to me in a proceeding that is going on. It is a matter sub judice. I will not be able to tell anything beyond. But a question is troubling the judges as to whether the GST Act is a combination of two separate streams of taxation, a tax on services on the one hand and a tax on goods on the other. And whether the word tax on goods or services or both essentially means that there are two parallel streams of taxation that are going in. A very, very provocative question that may have been asked, but a very, very difficult question to answer actually. Can we say that today the distinction and differentiation between services and goods no longer hold good because there is a merger or a convergence of these taxes insofar as central and state is concerned? Or are we to say that this is two statutes being merged by way of a clip? This is important to understand every time we try to draw out a distinction of a preferential treatment that a statute or a notification may grant to goods but not to services. For example, if somebody is eligible to claim credit because he is a goods, no sooner than he becomes somebody who's supplying services, he's denied. It is those kind of situations that will have to be tested to figure out, does the statute at all talk about two different streams of taxation, or is it as taxation on goods and services as a concept or a genus? Okay, so that's one issue that I thought may be of relevance to you. I'll move straight away from 246 to another interesting section, which is 286, before I talk about GST Council. Okay, 286, as has historically happened, was the controlling article which would make the states sit up and not tax something which was interstate in nature. So it was a check that was provided by the parliament to the state that since you have no power to levy tax on interstate supplies and I have retained it, you shall not therefore legislate anything in respect thereof. It also used to provide another exception. It used to say that insofar as declared goods are concerned, you have no power to levy tax at a rate higher than a certain rate, 4% or whatever we all remember. So there was a two kind of checks that 286 used to provide. A, that you can't tax anything which is without your bounds, which is essentially those transactions which fell under section 4 and 5 and section 3 of the CST Act. And B, that insofar as declared goods is concerned, you could tax them only in a defined manner. There will be no double taxation. If there was a tax, then you have to refund it on interstate supplies, and all those things were there. 286 has been cosmetically edited, and the second clause of 286, with the check and balance on the states, has been deleted. Very surprising. Now I'll tell you the effect of both. The cosmetic change that has happened insofar as 286 is concerned is in line with 246A, because as I mentioned, 246A continues to say interstate transaction, you shall not interfere. And that is what 286 echoes. But for 286.2, what that used to be there, that used to provide a restriction on declared goods. That entire clause has been deleted. Now take a situation. Your power under the list 1 insofar as interstate sales are concerned has been left pristine. Not a word of that entry has been deleted. That power gives the central government to levy tax on interstate supplies other than newspaper, etc., etc. Therefore, the Central Sales Tax Act is kicking and alive. Of course, the federal government has made a tinkering with that insofar as the goods defined in that CST Act is concerned. But that goods contains petroleum product. One of the petroleum product happens to be crude oil, which is the declared goods. Now look at the situation. A declared good crude, which continues to be covered by the Central Sales Tax Act, the leash that the Constitution used to exercise on the state government having been denuded, deleted by virtue of 286(2) having gone, the states are at complete freedom to levy tax on crude at any rate and as many times as it pleases. Until such time, such a clause is not brought back into the Constitution, the states can go hammer. So this is one anomaly that I noticed. The second thing that you also need to appreciate is, insofar as petroleum product is concerned, it is not that it will stay out of GST for a very long time, because 246A itself says, explanation, the provisions of this article shall, in respect of goods and services referred to in clause B, take effect from the date recommended by the Goods and Services Tax Council. Okay, and A used to talk about notwithstanding, etc., etc. Sorry, that petroleum product comes from the Parliament hub. It comes from the explanation itself. Effectively, therefore, it means that at a date that the council will recommend, the petroleum products will come into the GST regime. Why they have not come into discussion for some other day, but it is likely to happen. But what is excluded from the net of GST by virtue of the definition clause itself, supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Now, there's a great lot of discussion that is going on in terms of alcohol for human consumption versus alcohol for industrial consumption. That classification dispute was always been there in the past and will continue to remain. That has nothing to do with the constitutional frame of things. Okay. We then move to after 286. I want to deal with a few things which is quite mundane, but nevertheless very important. We look at the entries in the schedule. So entry 84, power to levy excise duty, has been truncated in as much as now you have power to levy excise duty only on those petroleum products, which continues to be liable to central excise duty. Interstate CST, that power 92A has been retained. 92C, which was a defunct article levying tax on power to levy tax on services, which was a defunct but never notified, that has been deleted. 97 has remained pristine. Of course, that we all have to remember that equalization levy is being used as a means to collect tax by the government through this entry 97. In the list 2, entry 54 has been truncated. Petroleum products, so power to levy tax on petroleum, so far as local sales is concerned, has been retained. Entry tax power has been deleted completely, so therefore there is no entry tax. What is equally important to remember is some of the entertainment tax related power has been also truncated to a lot. It has gone into the municipal level. That's a minutiae detail we don't need to get into. We'll come straight away to 279A. So now, why did we need this GST Council? At the beginning, I did a mention to you all that there was a cooperative federalism, in the sense that they were, each one of them were shedding some of their skin and trying to come together to work to, in a partnership, if I were to use that word, cooperative federalism. Obviously, as many people on the seat of a table, that many more different opinions are likely to happen. So somebody had to bell the cat. We had to have something called a uniform approach to GST. Otherwise, you would have had the same fate that VAT faced. We agreed to a revenue neutral rate of 12.5%. Kerala bolted, it went to 13.5%. Some states started moving up 15%. Somebody had to come on with a common architecture. And that common architecture, therefore, was very important for to be introduced, and therefore they needed a nodal body. But the problem was that between two sovereigns who have equal power to levy tax, which nodal body can you ask, can you even create, who can make their decision binding? None. It's just not possible, because that would then hit at the very root of distribution of power, or for that matter, the concept of federalism that India has, which is also a basic structure of our constitution. So original construct of GST Council was actually to rein the states at, at the original level, when it was first initiated and the bill lapsed, attempt was to rein the state, and they had a very, very strong power to control anybody that wanted to bolt, anybody that wanted to take a divergent view. That was, of course, at a political level not acceptable, and for the right reason, because that means the GST Council would become an extra constitutional power, going beyond the very concept of Bharat, which is so well defined in the very preamble and the Article 1 of our Constitution, and also the segregation and separation between the federal and the state. So they didn't want that to happen, and therefore the bill lapsed. What as a via media was brought out was GST Council, which used to be a dispute resolution body. That is the word that was used in the earlier version of the Constitution Amendment Bill, which was supposed to be a dispute resolution body, came down, scaled down itself to now say it is going to be only a recommendatory body, and it will only provide the procedure in case there is any dispute. Okay, now two things are very important. The role of the GST Council, therefore, is only recommendatory. And the language is, Goods and Service Tax Council shall make recommendations to the union and the state. The question is, and this is a very important constitutional question, is what is the importance, relevance of this recommendation? Is it a binding recommendation, or is it a directory recommendation? And I'll tell you why it becomes relevant. And the second is, if a state wants to deviate from that, can the state do so? And if so, what happens? What are the consequences of that? But more importantly, if you look at the functions of the GST Council, clause A to clause H, it's a very noble concept. 279A subclause 4, A to H is a very noble concept that they have brought out. The functions are very noble. Uniformity, uniformity, and uniformity. So that there are no edges, and if there are any edges, remove those edges, smoothen the edges, round the edges, so that it becomes a palatable, operable doctrine, palatable, operable tax reform. So the whole purpose and focus of GST Council is to make a consistent legislative policy, not legislation. Please remember that. A consistent legislative policy. A policy which has to be driven by clause 6, and I'm reading clause 6, therefore, 279A subclause 6. That is to my mind, the flagship point that should determine the functions or discharge of function by the GST Council. While discharging the functions conferred by this article, the GST Council shall be guided by the need for a harmonized structure of goods and service tax, and for development of a harmonized national market for goods and services. So the words are, shall be guided by the need for a harmonized structure of goods and service tax, which means harmonized tax structure for goods, services, and both, and for a development of a harmonized national market for goods and services, which means uniformity. Any decision that the GST Council is making, although not in the nature of a legislative action, it is policy making. And if it is not in sync with this whole avowed purposes of being guided by the need for harmonized structure of goods or services and harmonized national market, can be brought to question before a court of law. And that's a very important point I'm trying to make, that being a constitutional body, a policy decision of that kind, if it is found and seen to be arbitrary in nature, and if that arbitrariness is manifest, relevant considerations have not been gone into and irrelevant things have been gone into to consider that this is an harmony, devoid of the real-time, on the ground situation, you can certainly bring it up. But that discussion is for some other day. What is important, therefore, is this, therefore, makes it very recommendatory. And if you look at the statute, wherever the statute wants it, it says subject to the recommendation of the GST Council. It can only mean one thing to my mind. So long as there is a recommendation, that is good enough. There is no obligation of the state or the central government to comply with it. There is no obligation of the state or the central government to comply with it. Because if it was obligatory of the state or the central government to be complied with, the provisions would have read based on the recommendations only. It does not say that. So the choice, because it would have been a very, very difficult and a very compromising situation, because the states would then be started, that the states would then end up being run by this extra constitutional body called GST Council. If the recommendations of the GST Council was binding on the state and the federal, then for fiscal purposes, it was the GST Council that would have had the concentration of power. The states would have become completely denuded of any fiscal autonomy. But there is another side of that, which is the constitutional morality. Who sits in the GST Council? It's the Union Finance Minister, Union Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance, Minister in charge of Finance or Taxation, or any other minister nominated by each state government. Which means one of the members of each of the states, as also the federal member or the central government finance minister, they all form the quorum. Of course, the moment they form a quorum, there is a procedure through which the quorum decision will happen. I'm not getting into that. But there is therefore a participation of the states. Having sat in the room, and as it has happened in the last 3 years of GST having been kicking and alive, almost every decision in the GST Council has been through consensus, complete consensus. Late Shri Arun Jaitley used to pride on that point. And even it continues that there is a complete consensus among the state and the center, that every decision is done unanimously. Having taken a unanimous decision, having sent your representative to that council, can you then come back to your state and say, I do not agree with that? Would it not be immoral on your part of having accepted something in under one part of the constitution, having unanimously decided to agree? Can you then come back to the floor of your house and say, I do not agree? That would mean that would go to the root of constitutional morality, to my mind. But one thing comes out very clearly, that this is a recommendatory power. It does not go beyond that. Should there be a situation where there was not even a recommendation and yet the government comes out with a notification, as it happened insofar as advocates are concerned? There was a levy that was introduced and there was no recommendation. Somebody filed a writ petition. The Delhi High Court quashed it because there was a recommendation. Then that is a complete illegality because there was no recommendation at all. But merely because recommendation, does that mean I have to accept it? Probably no. That is another side of the story. And then the question is, when there is an arbitrage, in fact, now there are murmurs that are happening insofar as GST Council is concerned. There's a murmur that is happening that the compensation cess has not been paid on time. And I tell you why compensation cess was very important. It was part of the grand bargain. It is part of the grand bargain where the state said, fine, I will take some of my skin off, but you need to compensate me for whatever you're trying to tell me. It is my security. What if GST fails tomorrow? What if GST fails and I then can't be run politically because I'm in need for money? Because the central grants that comes from the central government is often used as a political tool. We all know that. And over dependence from the central government insofar as these grants and concession and largesse is concerned weakens the sovereignty of the state. And therefore they said, look, I am going to forego this revenue. I will become powerless to that extent. I'm appreciating the vision that you're trying to sell me, that the story that you're trying to tell me, that there will be an economic buoyancy because of GST. There'll be more compliance, there'll be more people on the net, etc., etc. But for heaven's sake, give me some security. I need that first 5 years, I should be compensated for my loss. So that loss, that sharing or that passing on of that compensation by the central government to the state government was a part of the most fundamental great bargain. And if monies don't start coming from the central government as it has been happening, for right reason, good reason, bad reason, I don't know, we don't care, it is just not coming. What will happen is this consensus that we see in the GST Council will no longer remain consensus. There will be no longer remain consensus because there are some states, Kerala wants a flood cess, some other state will come out with some other cess, and therefore, God save us if we were to get into that kind of a situation where the convergence kind of breaks. So that is a very important point insofar as GST Council is concerned. Then let me go shift. How much time do I have?
You have another 15 to 20 minutes. 15 minutes at least.
Okay. Then I'll come to 36629A and why it has been conspicuously left out. If you see, 36629A was created because of legislative incompetence. There was no other reason why 36629A was ever needed, because A represents amendment. So you needed a crutch like a 366A to evolve the concept of a deemed sale, because There was otherwise no power to collect tax. Now let us look at 246A. The width of the power that the states and the central have is so vast. All you need to prove that it is a supply. All you need to prove that it is a supply for a consideration in most cases, without consideration in select cases, and that it is for furtherance of business. No name, no other nomenclature, whether excise, whether customs, whether this, what is the taxable event, it is very flat, it's just supply. And even within the supply, what have they done? The very distortion of goods and services has been completely lost, because now we have a deemed supply. Worst contract is a deemed supply for immovable property. So the lacuna of lack of legitimate competence that was found before the Gannon-Dunkley case and thereafter Supreme Court blessed through Builders Association has been rectified by virtue of sweeping power available on tax on sale or purchase of goods. All you need to do is whether it's a supply of is it a supply of service or of goods. No more question needs to be asked. And they have very smartly said, I would believe this is a service and not a good, so that there is no discordant note or of any classification of goods or a service. So to me, 360-29A is a vestigial provision serving no purpose whatsoever. If anybody says that it has been retained for some ulterior plan, futuristic plan, let me also tell whoever is the votary of that my suggestion on that. The central government, the parliament, does not need to retain power to re-legislate. Having deleted 369A today, they can certainly come out with a constitutional amendment tomorrow, subject of course to the number on the floor of the house and subject also to 50% of the states agreeing to that. And the way this polity is going in, they seem to have all the powers to do so. They need just one constitutional amendment to bring it back. But they have left it, just as they have left many other provisions which probably don't make any sense. But be that as it may be, so therefore to me, 360-29A, there, not there, does not make any issue of concern. But Bhatia Sahab asked a question, I need to address that. He said, is it actually happening at a cooperative federalism level? Are the states and center in tandem? Forget about the states and center being in tandem or not. The GST Council and the revenue authorities are not in tandem. I was watching a WhatsApp some time back. If you remember, this whole issue about interest, whether it has to be levied on gross basis or net basis, had become a bone of contention after the judgment from the Telangana High Court. And therefore, there was a GST Council, minutes of the meeting where they say that no, we don't want it to be that harsh. We'll make it on a net basis and not on a gross basis. There was an amendment that was also introduced, brought out, but that amendment has not been notified yet. So the sad state of affairs is that we have a GST Council's thought process. We have High Court which reads the provision in a certain fashion, and we have an amendment that has not been implemented yet. The revenue is issuing notices stating that don't get guided by the GST Council directive. So there's no harmony at all. The left leg, left hand and the right hand are not even in harmony. If you ask me, technically speaking, could the commissioner concerned or could the officer concerned have done that? He need not have followed the GST Council. I have no difficulty in that. But to put it in the letter or a recovery letter or a show cause notice or a summon or whatever it is, to say that, mind you, GST Council, so minutes of the meeting should not be relied upon, goes to show what scant respect they are even talking about of a constitutional body which has taken a view. And it also goes to show the helplessness or the inability of the GST Council to make any dent because it is only recommendatory. Okay, so that's one paradox that comes out. But the other side of the paradox, very, very critical. When we launched GST, our avowed objective was tax neutrality, fewer exemptions, and complete pass-through of tax credits. What has come to become of GST is as many tax slabs that you can think of. Forget about this rate structure of 1%, 2%, whatever. I keep forgetting the rate structure also now today. 18%, 12%. Today we have a situation where there is a 6% rate and some 5% rate without credit. And this without credit rate is a very new architectural design that the GST Council seems to have brought out as a compromise within the trade lobbies. What purpose does it serve? If you're going to introduce GST rates without credit, and a whole host of things are getting covered under that, you might as well go back to the old days. What is the purpose of convergence? Therefore, you're talking about and creating such a hoopla about this whole thing about IT systems had to be redesigned, because industry has also walked hand in hand trying to gear up to the IT system that was needed. They did not shy. Notwithstanding GSTN not being working, and GSTN was, I think it was completely not thought through. They didn't even realize the significant size of the problem. And whoever took the decision in a haste did not even realize the kind of volume of traffic and the transactional data points that are needed for even a small company. So be that as it may be, GSTN not working, government company, private company, there was a PIL that was filed. Somebody wanted, not a PIL, there was a RTI that was filed. Somebody wanted the details of the GST, and High Court says, no, it is a private body today. At the end of the day, it has now turned out to be a private body working as efficiently or as inefficiently as is possible to any other body. But the whole design and architecture of GST was based on a back-end GSTN. And that GSTN has, to my mind, not delivered to the satisfaction. It is a continuous work in progress. It's an experimentation that is happening. It is a situation where several crores of rupees of transition credit have got lost or being litigated because of inability of the portal to be able to handle that at that point in time. So to come back to that, is there any cooperative federalism that we are seeing? I'm not even seeing the cooperative federalism within the GST Council and his executors. Now we come back to the state and the center. And a very interesting situation. There are some GST amendments that have happened for which the corresponding state amendments have not even happened. In Delhi specifically, I am aware of Delhi specifically. Even though GST amendments have happened, 36(4) amendments have happened, or the provisions are there or whatever else, the state government has not even legislated. Is it out of lethargy? Is it out of lack of awareness? Or is it just about being ignorant about it? I don't know. And if you go around the country looking for such situations, you'll get umpteen such examples. Today, and the last 10 days, I've been arguing a matter, which is why I got delayed in coming in. There is a provision that is being argued as being ultra vires. We will see what the courts say. We bow down to that. But when the state submits and makes a statement about the validity of that, one would assume, and it's the same section. The provisions of the CGST and the state GST does not read any different, barring a few places. But when the state makes a statement about the validity of a particular provision of law, you would expect the central government to say, I adopt and I add. That is what, because the section should mean the same. For some strange reason, the center is not willing to make that statement, and center is waiting for an independent instruction on that particular provision. Now, that independent instruction could be because it's just a matter of protocol, and therefore I will not want to open my mouth until I've been instructed. That could be one. Or the independent state could be that the central government's thinking on the policy objective of the law could be different from how the states are observing it. It could be either. I hope it is not the latter. I hope that the states thinking about what is the avowed objective of GST is not different from that of the central government. Because if that is the case, then you are in for trouble till cows come home. And I'll tell you the reason. And the fact of the matter, the states are still drunk in the power of the days of yore. They still believe that the tax law has to be looked at just as sales tax used to be looked at. Their appreciation to be able to escalate themselves from the sales tax based or a VAT based narrow approach to taxation to a larger larger norm of neutrality, tax on businesses not to be there for furtherance of business has been completely lost. And that you see the answer of that when you look at the advance ruling that are coming out every Sunday morning, every Monday morning, every Tuesday evening. And the quality of the advance ruling speaks volumes about their perception of law. And I'll give you one illustration. For the longest time, for your ability to claim credit, nowhere, even in the erstwhile law, nowhere did the law say that the goods should be used directly for making a sale. Nowhere, not a single law that I am aware of in my limited experience, did I ever say that goods should be used directly in the manufacturing process or directly in sale. It used vast words like in or in relation to manufacture, or used for providing services, or used in manufacture for resale, or resale, etc., etc. And the Supreme Court had read in the context of Form C to mean that anything that is commercially inexpedient to carry out will have to be read in as a necessary concomitant to be able to produce, generate. Rajasthan State Electricity Board judgment, East India Cotton, all of those are landmark judgments in the context of Form C, etc., to say that if use in manufacture cannot happen without something which will make, theoretically you can manufacture, but economically you can't, then that has to be read in. That was the philosophy back then. Today's AR rulings are reading used in business under section 16 isolated when it comes to plant and machinery. Because if you look at section 17.5, because plant and machinery is the only God's gift to mankind which has been allowed to claim credit in the whole list of 17.5, and that God gift to mankind has also got some restrictions and conditions. It says plant and machinery means apparatus, equipment, machinery fixed to the earth by foundation or structural support that are used for making outward supply. They're reading the word used for making outward supply to mean used directly for making outward supply. They're using terms like place of usage, that has to be there, and the purpose of use. They're distorting because that was convenient for them. Because the very international concept of use in furtherance of business is getting lost sight of. So to answer that very difficult, and it has some destructive effect on the economy as well. I don't think there is a harmony of the kind that the Constitution envisaged. I don't think GST Council is doing its due either. In the garb of doing, managing the perception of the stakeholders, they are making compromises that goes to obliterate, that will obliterate the very architecture of GST. It is no more the 4-rate structure that we are talking about. And as Madam President mentioned, every day there is an amendment. Which legislation can you even think of which has gone through that many amendments, that too multiple retrospective in the section, the legislation, and that too multiple in the regulations and rules, etc. So in short and in fine, I would say the Constitution of India does provide for a common market. The common market in a place where the state and center work together in tandem. It is expected to create a national harmony and a national market. But the implementation of the legislation in the way it is happening, and there are some very ticklish provisions in the plenary legislation that begs a question on Article 14 itself. But be that as it may be. But for this constitutional amendment, we wouldn't have been sitting here today and debating and discussing GST. Therefore, hats off to the constitutional amendment. It has ushered a new beginning and a new approach to taxation, significantly different from what we had. It is time that we start appreciating the nuances of the Constitution. And since we are short of time, I'll probably rest my discussion here. Thank you all for having me with you all.
Hello. Srivastava ji, open kariye.
Sir, you are audible. Sir, you are audible.
I'm audible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Sujit bhai, thank you so much for such a nice deliberation. I have a query, and thereafter Mr. Anuj Bansal will be asking the queries which members, participants have asked. As in your deliberation, you have referred that notices are being received from the tax officers that pay interest on the gross liability, as amendment has not been notified so far. And below that notice, you are right. It is written that GST Council reference should not be given in your reply. You are very right. So now the question is, what is the remedy with us? What to reply?
No, I think, and I have given my considered thought on this, not this notice per se, but on this gross versus net itself. I think until the amendment happens, we have no way to help ourselves. The amendment was very important for everybody unless you challenge the law itself. Unlikely that the law will get struck down. But when the amendment happens, the government has to notify it retrospectively. But the fact is that provision under the Amendment Act through which it came, it says from a date to be notified, that date remains blank. I would urge, therefore, the industry bodies to go and tell the government that as and when you notify it, to give a date closer to when the act actually came into being, and not make it of a date of current time. But otherwise, the tax officers have all the power to create the havoc that they're doing.
No, the question is who will go to the government and tell them to notify it? Why they are notifying it? Is there any reason behind it?
No, one doesn't know why they're not, because I think they don't care. They don't care, I suppose.
Only notifications which are favorable to them, they are making it, and
Correct. Exactly.
public, they are not notifying it.
Absolutely.
Sir,
So, PC Joshi sir, you are also here. Can you advise on this issue?
I would say that independently we should argue on the basis of law that after all ITC is claiming is nothing but a tax paid, and therefore that has to be reduced from the out supply. I mean outward supply. Whatever tax is payable on outward supply has to be reduced on from the import tax, and therefore we should go for Madras High Court judgment, not Telangana. But
no, sir,
go for Madras High Court judgment.
Sir, problem is that he will attach my bank account if I will not pay.
No, you can file a writ petition and get the order.
Okay. Anuji?
hello.
Anuji, please.
Sir, just a small announcement. Those who wants to ask any question, please type your name in the chat box so that one by one I can unmute the person. A query has been now the query has been received from Mr. Malika Arjunji whether IGST paid on the imported goods is a GST or a custom duty. Somehow his mic is not working, so he asked me to ask this question.
The power
but that is outside the scope of today's lecture.
So the session chairman has already checked, so we don't need to answer that.
Okay, we will send this question to Sujit Ghosh and he will reply later on. Next question.
So there is no other question in the chat box, in fact, sir.
Oh, that is excellent.
Sandeep Goyal ji has raised his hand. उनको आप unmute कर दीजिए.
Please repeat the name.
Sandeep Goyal ji has raised his hand.
Sorry.
Good evening, Sujit. As usual, we enjoyed your session. I have a question with regard to the constitutional aspects of GST Council. I have posed this question to a couple of other speakers also earlier. See, GST Council, if you see the decisions, as you say, are recommendatory. The language itself also says 279A, right? So the question arises that the decision in the GST Council has to be taken by the majority, which is again mentioned in 279A9, where the central government has 1/3 weightage and the state governments altogether have 2/3 weightage of the total votes. Now, if a decision is taken, as of now, all the decisions are being taken unanimously. Now, there may be a situation, say, a couple of states or maybe more than that, states do not agree with it, but the decision does get through. The decision gets through because by a majority also. Now, as you say that they go back to their states, can they refuse to implement that decision of the GST Council because it is recommendatory? And if it is so, it is not binding at all. Now, the question of having GST Council, I mean, why should we have an extra constitutional body at all, which does not have any power? In fact, it has to be because ultimately GST Council has only the finance ministers in it, who is only one of the representative of the state government. The matter has to be placed before the legislature, who have to deliberate upon, and they may think in the terms of their own state that it is not correct. But then they have taken a decision, and that decision has to be taken by majority. The central government has its say by way of 1/3 votes. So how do we reconcile all these inconsistencies actually?
So at the beginning, I mentioned that the first version of the Constitution Amendment Bill was, it was a dispute resolution body. It was more like a mandatory thing. It would resolve the conflict between the two warring state or the center or the state versus state. And the reason why GST remained in the drawer for 10 long years, since the first discussion paper came out in 2009, was because of this precise problem, that who takes control over the divergent views of the various states. Okay. And therefore, it was a compromise that each of them came to, because what was important was convergence. I was involved in the team, part of the team that had designed the Delhi VAT Act. Okay, at that time, I was to work in this firm called Arthur Anderson, and we had the mandate from the government of Delhi to design the Delhi VAT Act. When we did that, we brought in a lot of good understanding from the New Zealand VAT system. And therefore, Delhi VAT Act was almost a, I would say replica, but it kind of mirrored some of the larger concepts of VAT from the New Zealand VAT. At that point in time, I used to attend a number of this empowered committee at that time meetings. And what used to be told to us in every meeting by the then, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name anyway, that we need to have a convergence on VAT, even though it is not nationwide VAT, even between the states, we need to have a convergence. A lot of discussion was happening on the revenue neutral rate, 12.5%, that magic rate of 12.5%. So the whole purpose of GST Council was, and the empowered committee was toothless under the VAT times. Okay, the gentleman had one secretary available to him, and he would make his meeting notes, invite all the state ministers, chai pakoda, etc., and then things would move on. And therefore, there was a lot of hard work that went into to come to some kind of convergence at that time. And then suddenly we saw Kerala was the first state, if I remember. Punjab and Haryana as well was the other state. Diesel or whatever else, no, not diesel or outside VAT. Some product I remember, Punjab and Haryana raised the rate, revenue neutral rate. Kerala increased the revenue neutral rate from 12.5 to about 13%. And there was sudden loose cannons flowing around. The rate started moving up. VAT revenue neutral rate lost control. Therefore, what was being criticized at that point in time was that, no, we can't have a executive body appointed through some kind of office memo to rein in the states. We have to have somebody which had a legitimate power under some kind of legislative scheme. And therefore, it was felt that why don't we make it into a constitutional body? So the whole purpose of making it into a constitutional body was to offer legitimacy to the recommendation and not a chai pakoda recommendation. Please appreciate that. That was a very, very defining moment, because we used to get very frustrated when recommendations would be generated. We would bring it back to the Delhi government. Delhi government would say, no, we don't want to bring it in this fashion. Because there was, I mean, of course, there are political things issue also, keeping those aside. So to accord a legitimacy, and here the word legitimacy is constitutional legitimacy, to put the recommendation at a pedestal of a higher law. Because if a constitutional body is authorized to make a recommendation, that recommendation becomes a policy decision under the Constitution. And a policy decision becomes at a higher plane than an executive decision. You understand that, right? So they wanted to, instead of an executive decision, they wanted to give a policy decision color by putting it at a higher level, therefore a constitutional body. But the problem is, you may recommend, it is for me to accept it. That debate will happen. And should such a fight happen, trust me, and as I told you, I am forewarning the whole industry that with each compensation cess delay happening, the bonhomie and the unanimity in the GST Council will start losing its skin, its sheen. West Bengal's finance minister has already blown the bugle. There are other states also who are blowing the bugle as well. Chhattisgarh has also blown the bugle.
Yes.
So this unanimity and bonhomie is called a honeymoon period, if I were to call it, is almost coming to an end.
Yes.
And as the national election starts coming in, you will see more of that that kind of sound coming out. So trust me, the real challenge is going to be when the state and the center come head on, or two states come head on. Who will bell the cat? Because GST Council has it only has the power to lay down the procedure for dispute resolution. Have a read at that particular clause since you raise it. Just one sec.
I fully agree with Sujit viewpoint on this, that GST Council constitution is not really working. The way it was envisaged and the way it is working at present is not, I believe, they're serving the purpose. And I am confident in that within the next GST meeting, there will be a lot of confusions, there will be a lot of debates, and the states may go haywire. I have absolutely sure on it. I can't tell the future, but I believe that this will come out very soon.
We are going to have some constitutional problems then.
Yeah.
And I think in the earlier version, they had provision for imposing penalty also. GST
Correct.
Council was being empowered at
So
that point of time.
it was a dispute resolution body with a superpower to rein them.
Yes.
And that is why the bill failed.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is why the bill failed.
Now, sir, Sujit, just to add to that query, Mr. Bhatia has also put with regard to, and Mr. Madan has also talked about the interest issue. Now, the GST Council has recommended that such and such provision should be made, and they have recommended. The government has also issued the necessary law has also been made. It's the executive which is not issuing the notification. So it's very simple that even the executive can defy whatever is being said by GST Council for that matter.
No, I don't think it is an executive who will do that. I do appreciate something.
Yeah.
When a power is conferred to notify, they're
Yes.
using legislative power.
Yes.
Executive wearing the hat of a legislature is doing that. So it is not an executive power that they're doing, it is a legislative power.
No, what I'm saying, see, GST Council never says that you do the things in a particular way. They just show their intention. The things are so open-ended that the legislature as well as the executive turn it around.
Which is what I'm trying to say and allude to, that this recommendation is only paper recommendation.
Yes.
Some 3-4 years from now.
Yes.
Recommendation, like I said, the states will stand up and say, I defy and I am bolting the stable.
I've seen the recommendation of the council being totally thrown away.
Sujit bhai, when the central finance minister is also there and he has agreed to a particular recommendation, then why the legislature can refuse to do it? Why, whether any writ or any PIL or SLP cannot be filed in Supreme Court?
No, I'll tell you why it can't be. You can file a writ against a quasi-judicial order, or a legislative action, or an administrative action. You cannot file a writ petition against a file note, or an internal decision, or a minutes of the meeting, which has yet to take shape of a legislative or a law. So right now, it has not come out of the ken of the lawmaking process. It is still an interdepartmental conversation that is going on, which has been made public. What is GST Council's recommendation? It is not a recommendation to you and me. It will recommend the state and the center. So it is almost like an interdepartmental file movement that I recommend the promotion of this person. Ultimate decision making of that will happen when that person exercises the power in the manner that he has been prescribed to do so. So courts will not interfere in the policy decision making process. After all, Parliament, what happens inside the well of the house is covered by the privilege of the Parliament. In fact, the Parliament can even call a judge to the Parliament and impeach or do whatever it will, as it did in UP. When an Allahabad High Court judge issued a warrant against a sitting member of the legislature of UP, that person was called into the house of the legislature and he was, impeachment. It went to Supreme Court thereafter. The power of the legislature within the well of the house is so sacrosanct, judiciary will not even venture into it. So forget about any PIL, etc., etc. It'll be a waste of your time and energy. And hope.
फिर तो सुजीत भाई, फिर तो ये काउंसिल को स्क्रैप कर देना चाहिए ना, अगर
अभी तो मैं बोल रहा हूँ, तभी तो मैं बोल रहा हूँ, वही तो मेरा आपको इशारा समझ में आ गया है बस. I can't say.
Madan sir, I would like to supplement.
Yes,
I would
sir.
like to supplement.
Yes, sir.
Kindly see clause 11 of Article 279A itself provides statutorily they have to provide for a mechanism for any dispute between the center and the states. That itself provides section sub clause 11 of 279A. So therefore, there is a mechanism provided under the constitution itself for disputes between the states and the center or between the two states at all. So that is there.
No, so
But
there is
sir,
a.
but sir, this is not
Sir,
a
that will
dispute.
be, yes, that will be a case where there is a dispute, where both agree that we have not to issue any notification, they would not implement.
No. I would say the center will say you issue and the state will say don't issue.
No, sir, here, when the center finance minister has agreed with the state finance minister, where is the dispute?
No, but what Mr. Joshi is saying is that if there is a dispute.
But they have not notified.
Yes.
There
So
is
in that way, it becomes
they have not
mandatory.
notified. Yeah.
Then it becomes mandatory, sir.
Mandatory, yeah.
No, so let me give my.
They have to implement.
How to
They
make
have to
it
issue
mandatory for the
notification.
central
Joshi
government
sir,
to notify?
Okay.
Joshi sir, you have to see behind the curtain why there is delay in issuing all these executive orders or notifications. It is because of this reason that some states do not want to obey the decisions or their consent which have been given. Just Sujit was talking that the finance ministers are coming to the meeting and they give a consent, and then their legislature or then their bureaucratic machinery is not agreeing to it. So that is the big problem, and that will come out very soon to the streets.
No, but then ultimately the Supreme Court will reply.
Yeah, the Supreme Court will reply, or the Parliament has to take some initiative.
Cognizance of such problems.
Yeah.
But sir, if we have a look at the provisions of the Act, the word prescribed means that the rules which are prescribed on the recommendations of the GST Council. So in a way, unless the GST Council recommends, they can't frame any rules also. So it becomes mandatory that way, because you can't frame rules without the recommendation of GST Council.
That's right. You are right. I agree with you.
So my reading of that clause, as Joshi sir rightly brought out, indeed it contemplates some kind of a procedure for dispute resolution, but it assumes two things therefore. That despite the recommendation, there will be a dispute. One of the states not agreeing to the recommendation. That is what the recommendation, because having agreed and a council decision has been taken, then you have to accept it in toto. And if you are not accepting, only then the dispute starts. So therefore, it itself shows that inherent fact that it is only recommendatory and not binding, point one. Point two, the power is only to prescribe the procedure for dispute resolution, not the dispute itself. Power is to prescribe the procedure for dispute resolution, namely, it shall be through a forum of 3 people comprising of High Court judges, Supreme Court judges, retirement at the age of 65, chai, pani, pakoda, etc., etc. That is all that they will do. But the dispute per se resolution authority, I don't think that body will have. Because remember, the Constitution provides Supreme Court the original jurisdiction to resolve state versus center, center versus state, those kind of disputes. Unless for something like a Kaveri, etc., they came to a Kaveri River Dispute Tribunal. So until Kaveri Dispute Resolution Tribunal was created, all those interstate disputes are all with the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court.
Correct. I agree with you.
Nikita madam, what AIFTP can do in this case when notification is not issued?
We can only represent which we have already represented. We have already represented. And let me tell you, 1 or 2 writ petitions are filed in Mumbai High Court, but unfortunately because of pandemics, kuch aage chal nahi raha hai. But see, I believe there can be a writ against inaction also. And there you can file a writ stating that there is an amendment, there is a GST Council meeting, but for whatever reason, they are not coming out, and I am facing harassment from there has to be a very genuine case of harassment. Then the government, the High Court will ask the other side, please give your reply. What is your answer to that? At least some answer would come.
So, madam,
Correct.
Something should
Correct. I agree with you.
Today itself, I have seen a notice of that type.
हाँ तो बड़ा अमाउंट है तो करो सुजीत जी को कांटेक्ट करो कर लेंगे उधर
Okay.
पर फीस देनी पड़ेगी मदान साहब, फीस देनी पड़ेगी।
ठीक है सर,
बड़ा अमाउंट
तो
है
क्लाइंट देगा
दे दे
Bhatia sir will lead it.
नहीं नहीं सुजीत करेंगे, पर फीस देनी पड़ेगी सुजीत को।
ठीक है सर, ठीक है।
I'll only assist him. I'll help him.
Any other question? Any other question?
Yeah. One observation I have. See, we have overzealous officers in implementing GST. And at times there are suggestions by them to charge GST which one does not even can think of. Like I came across somebody telling that there is a suggestion to charge a GST on the dividend declared by a company on the logic that, well, this is a service provided by the company to the shareholder. Now, if we have these sort of innovative ideas, I wonder where will it land up to? Every state will come out, every overzealous officer will come out with something. That, okay, let's charge this, let's charge on this and this.
Why are you worried? More the merrier.
Sir, the point is, this kind of thing is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Wait till the audit starts. There will be even more preposterous things.
Yeah, that is what is that. Where do we ultimately lead to the success of this new legislation?
This is a work hazard. You live in the GST with this tax office, you will go on, and these are new things. They will say, "Who am I to decide?" You fight it in the court. I think there's no accountability at all. That's
no, yes, exactly.
Srivastava ji, move on to Asim Jafar, please.
Yeah, I think no. Joshi sir wants to say anything.
Okay, please.
If Joshi sir wants to say his
yes,
concluding remark, and then do Asim Jafar.
Let's close, otherwise we have closed the
Just. Joshi sir, we started about 5-10 minutes late. So just anything Joshi sir wants to add up. I think we lost contact.
Okay, move on to Asim Jafar.
Asim should take over now. Asim.
Thank you. Good evening to all. Respected National President, Madam Nikita ji, past President and Webinar Chairman, Nishi Joshi Saab, past President, Madam Premlata Bansal ji, learned Speaker Sujit Ghosh ji, VP North Zone A.K. Srivastava ji, Course Director of this webcast series, Shri H.L. Madan ji, respected H.C. Bhatia ji, VP Gupta ji, and Anuj Bansal ji, and all the learned participants of this inaugural program of webcast series. This has been a wonderful start to this series of lectures where learned speaker Shri Sujit Ghosh ji has explained the intricacies of GST law in the most masterly manner. The in-depth study of learned speaker Shri Sujit Ghosh ji on the subject has dispelled many doubts of the GST provisions. Sir, I thank you very much for the most illuminating and educative webinar. I would take opportunity to request you to make yourself available again and again for the benefits of our members in future also. I also thank our respected National President, Madam Nikita ji, past President Joshi Saab, past President Madam Premlata Bansal ji, VP North Zone A.K. Srivastava ji, S.C. Bhatia ji, and H.L. Madan Saab. I also thank VP Gupta ji and Anuj Bansal ji for providing the technical support to this webcast series on GST. Several senior AIFTP members have also joined the webinar. To name a few, Mr. Mukul Gupta ji, Mr. O.P. Shukla, Mr. D.K. Gandhi Saab, Sanjay Sharma ji, Sanjay Kumar, Arvind Mishra ji, Jamna Shukla ji, Dharmen Srivastava ji, Sandeep Goyal ji, Tayyab M. Khan, our North Zone Vice Chairman, and Puneet Kumar Singh, North Zone Secretary. I thank you all. Thank you.
Sujit sir, your memento is due.
I will take it virtually.
Whenever we will deliver it.
Cup of tea someday. Yeah.
Yes.
Sujit ji, thank you very much for an enlightening
It will not be supply. It will not be supply.
Mutuality of interest.